The disturbing origins of angels explained. The angels in the Bible were so horrifying that almost every single time one appeared, the very first words out of its mouth were, "Do not be afraid." Ask yourself why. Why would a messenger of comfort, a beautiful winged figure, need to open by begging a human not to panic? The answer is the thing nobody tells you in church. The angels of Scripture looked nothing like the gentle, haloed humans with feathered wings you picture today. They were creatures of wheels within wheels, covered in eyes, beings with 4 faces, burning serpents in the sky. And the beautiful angel you imagine was an invention, created centuries later by artists who needed to sell a softer god. In the next 13 minutes, we are going to strip away 2,000 years of artistic propaganda and meet the real angels of the ancient world. We will climb the actual hierarchy of heaven, from the alien, eye-covered guardians of God's throne, down through the warrior messengers, all the way to the fallen ones. You will learn what the Ophanim, the Cherubim, and the Seraphim actually were, why the prophets who saw them fell to the ground in terror, and exactly how these monsters were transformed into the harmless decorations on your Christmas cards. By the end, you will never look at a painting of an angel the same way again. Let's start at the top, with the most disturbing of them all. Please subscribe for a new deep dive every week. The prophet Ezekiel was sitting by a river in exile when the sky tore open, and what he described next is one of the strangest passages in all of Scripture. He saw wheels, enormous wheels on the ground, beside 4-faced creatures gleaming like a precious stone. But these were not ordinary wheels. Ezekiel describes a wheel intersecting a wheel, a structure that should be physically impossible. And their rims, he says, were full of eyes all around. These are the Ophanim, a word that literally means wheels. In later Jewish angelic tradition, they were elevated into one of the highest ranks of heaven, the very thrones or chariot of God himself. They did not walk. They moved in any direction without turning. They did not sleep. The eyes never closed. Imagine a being whose entire body is a rotating mechanism of perception, watching in every direction at once, blazing with light, moving with the Spirit of God. This is not a baby with a harp. This is something closer to a living machine, an intelligence so far beyond human form that Ezekiel could barely find words for it. And the Ophanim were just the outer guard. To understand what they were protecting, we have to meet the creatures standing right beside them, the ones whose name has been stolen and softened more than any other in history. Say the word cherub, and your brain produces a chubby, smiling infant with little wings, floating in a Valentine's card. That image is one of the greatest distortions in religious history. The cherubim of the Bible are guardians and warriors. When God exiles humanity from the Garden of Eden, he does not post a gentle baby at the gate. He places cherubim there with a flaming, ever-turning sword to block the way back to the tree of life. These are the enforcers of the divine boundary, and their appearance, as Ezekiel describes them, is staggering. Each had 4 faces, the face of a human, a lion, an ox, and an eagle, representing dominion over all of creation. Each had 4 wings. Their legs were straight, their feet like a calf's, and they gleamed like polished bronze. Beneath their wings were human hands. They moved together as one, and wherever the Spirit went, they went, never turning as they moved. So how did this 4-faced bronze guardian become a fat, smiling baby? The answer is the Renaissance. Centuries later, artists began conflating these terrifying cherubim with the putti, the cute winged infants borrowed from Greek and Roman art, the little cupids of classical mythology. The names blurred, the imagery merged, and the warrior of Eden was demoted into a decoration. But the most beautiful and the most disturbing angel of all was the one that stood even closer to God and was literally on fire. The prophet Isaiah had his own vision of the throne of God, and above it, he saw beings he called the Seraphim. Here is the detail that unsettles scholars. The word seraph comes from a Hebrew root meaning to burn. Seraphim literally means the burning ones, and the same Hebrew word, saraph, is used elsewhere in the Bible to describe the fiery, venomous serpents that plagued the Israelites in the desert. The burning ones, the fiery serpents, the connection between the highest angels and serpents of fire runs deeper than most people ever realize. Isaiah describes them with 6 wings. With 2, they covered their faces, because not even these beings could look directly upon God. With 2, they covered their feet, and with 2, they flew. And they called out to one another, the cry that would echo through every cathedral in history. Holy, holy, holy. Their voices shook the doorposts, and the temple filled with smoke. And Isaiah's reaction tells you everything. He does not feel comforted. He cries out that he is ruined, undone, because he is a man of unclean lips who has seen the king. One of the seraphim then flies to him carrying a burning coal taken from the altar and presses it against his mouth to purify him. These are beings of such overwhelming holiness that being near them is physically unbearable. Now we have met the 3 highest orders, but the angels most humans actually deal with were lower down and far more familiar. Here is something that surprises almost everyone. The word angel does not describe what these beings are. It describes what they do. The English word comes from the Greek angelos, which simply means messenger. The Hebrew equivalent, malach, means the same thing. An angel is not a species, it is a job title. And the messengers who appear throughout the Bible to ordinary people often look completely, terrifyingly human. When 3 visitors come to Abraham, he believes they are men and offers them food. When 2 angels arrive in the city of Sodom, the inhabitants see only male strangers. The patriarch Jacob physically wrestles a mysterious figure all night long, only realizing afterward that he had struggled with the divine. This is the origin of one of the most haunting lines in Scripture. The warning to show hospitality to strangers, because some have entertained angels without knowing it. So the biblical reality splits into 2 extremes. At the throne, you have the alien horrors, the wheels of eyes, the 4-faced guardians, the burning serpent beings. And among humanity, you have messengers so ordinary-looking you could share a meal with one and never know. There was no halo, no feathered wings, no flowing robes. So, where did all of that come from? The answer is a deliberate transformation. And it begins with one very famous angel who had a name and a sword. Above the ordinary messengers stood the archangels, the chief messengers. And only a handful are ever named in Scripture. Chief among them is Michael. Michael is not gentle. In the book of Daniel, he is called a great prince who fights on behalf of God's people. And in the book of Revelation, it is Michael who leads the armies of heaven into war against the dragon, casting the great adversary down from the sky. He is a military commander, a general of celestial war. Then there is Gabriel, the great announcer, the one who delivers the most pivotal messages in Scripture. And notice the pattern again. When Gabriel appears to Daniel, the prophet is so overwhelmed he falls on his face, terrified, and loses his strength. When Gabriel appears to others, the reaction is the same: fear, trembling, collapse. Even the named friendly archangels provoke raw terror in the humans who encounter them. This is the consistent thread running through the entire Bible. Encountering an angel is not a comforting experience. It is an overwhelming, often physically debilitating one, which makes the soft, sentimental angel of modern imagination even more bizarre. To understand that transformation, we have to follow the angels into their darkest chapter, the ones who fell. Outside the Standard Bible, in an ancient text called the Book of Enoch, lies one of the most disturbing angelic stories ever written. The story of the Watchers. The Watchers were a class of angels who, according to Enoch, were sent to observe humanity. But 200 of them, led by a figure named Semjaza, broke their sacred oath. They descended to earth, took human wives, and fathered monstrous offspring. The Nephilim, a race of giants that, in the story, devoured the resources of the earth and turned to violence. But their greatest crime was knowledge. The fallen Watchers, the text says, taught humanity forbidden secrets, the making of weapons and warfare, the working of metals, the art of sorcery, the use of cosmetics and enchantments. They corrupted the world not just through their giant children, but by handing humans powers they were never meant to possess. For this, the story says, they were judged and bound beneath the earth to await final punishment. This narrative, angels falling through pride and forbidden desire, became the seed of the entire Western mythology of fallen angels and demons. It is the dark mirror of the angelic hierarchy, beings of light who chose to descend. And it sets up the final question of our autopsy. If the originals were this terrifying, who decided to make them beautiful? Here is the great reveal. The beautiful angel, the serene human with feathered wings and a glowing halo, is not from the Bible. It is from the history of art. In the earliest centuries of Christianity, angels were often depicted simply as men with no wings at all. So where did the wings come from? Artists borrowed them. The winged figure of victory from Greek and Roman art, the goddess Nike, the concept of victory, provided a ready-made template for a celestial being in flight. And the halo. That golden disk of light was a symbol used across the ancient world by the Greeks, the Romans, and others to mark gods, emperors, and sacred figures. Christian artists adopted it to signify holiness. Piece by piece, the visual vocabulary of pagan art was repurposed to build a new, recognizable, approachable angel. Then came the Renaissance, and it completed the transformation. Artists, focused on idealized human beauty, painted angels as flawless people. The terrifying four-faced cherubim were merged with chubby pagan cupids. The burning seraphim became graceful figures. The overwhelming alien horror of the throne room was sanded down into something a worshipper could love, rather than fear. The monsters of Ezekiel had been fully domesticated. So let's assemble what we've uncovered. The angels of Scripture were never gentle. At the highest level, they were the Ophanim, wheels of living fire covered in eyes. The cherubim, four-faced bronze guardians with flaming swords. The seraphim, six-winged burning ones whose holiness was unbearable. Below them, messengers so human you might share a meal with one, and warrior princes whose presence flattened prophets to the ground. The beautiful angel you grew up with is real, but it is a work of art, not a work of scripture. It was assembled from Greek wings, pagan halos, and Renaissance idealism, built specifically to comfort rather than terrify. And understanding that gap between the overwhelming alien beings the prophets actually described and the sentimental figures we inherited changes how you read the entire ancient world. The phrase, "do not be afraid," suddenly makes perfect sense. They had to say it, because what people were actually seeing was beyond anything a human mind was built to hold. If the true forms of the angels disturbed you, then you are not ready for what happened to the ones who fell. Because the most famous fallen angel of all has an origin story that almost nobody gets right, and he was never supposed to be the villain. That video is right here, and it picks up exactly where this one ends. Tap it now, and let's keep climbing the hierarchy, all the way down.